How is it rocking, Dween Nation? Stay here because we are just about to get underway. In the meantime, please like, comment, and subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications. We put out weekly sports content, and we want to continue to build up Dween Nation and the brand that is Dween Sports. Thank you all, and enjoy. Welcome in, Dween Nation. This is your host, Justin Paez, alongside Genoa Agudelo, and this is the Dween Sports Podcast, here recapping the second week of the NFL season. Boy, was it crazy. We got to see some more points this week. After the sluggish week one we saw, obviously there was still some in week two, but exciting football all weekend. And before we dive into all of it, Genoa, how you feeling?
Yo, Dween Nation, Justin, I'm feeling great. Hey, we just finished another week of this young 2024 NFL season, Justin. It was crazy. So many crazy things happened. So many upsets, Justin. Teams that we didn't think were going to win won. Not only that, performances were very high. I'm so excited to get into some rookie performances as well, Justin. And what a week two it was, Justin. It's just why the NFL is so amazing, just because how unpredictable it is.
For sure.
And it was just definitely a fun week all around to watch.
No, yeah, and like looking at our predictions that we had, score predictions from this past week, it's our roughest week for sure. And we're going to bounce back, though, even though, to be honest with you, some of these picks this week were – some of the upsets this week were wild. I mean, we saw New Orleans take down Dallas. We saw, Malik Willis-led Packers take down the Colts. We saw Philly just lose. We saw Baltimore lose at home. Some major so the Niners lost to Minnesota. So we'll see. Maybe those teams aren't the real deal, or the teams that beat them are the real deal. We're going to dive into now. So we're going to cut this episode into two parts. We're going to talk about 8 games and then 8 games, kind of make it easier for you guys to listen to it, episode by episode. And then we're also going to be sending out some waivers, following this week two, everything that happened in week 2, and you get you guys ready for week 3, because tomorrow's Tuesday, then it's Wednesday, then it's football again. So let's dive into the first game that I want to talk about. You're seeing me right now. I'm heartbroken. We're going to dive into Monday night, which just happened. Philadelphia loses at home 22-21 against the Atlanta Falcons. Monday night, Kirk Cousins, who's historically awful, takes down Philly on the road. Philly gets stormed with boos. I don't know if you heard at the end of the game, because some tough play calls at the end of the game. They decide to throw it on third down instead of running it. They would have had it. Saquon drops the pass, stops the clock. Then Atlanta runs down the field, gets a touchdown to Drake London, and then Philly, with the last-ditch effort to try to win, Jalen Hurts throws a pick. And that's kind of the story of what Philly had this week. It was kind of Saquon reliant most of the games. And I think that's what it's going to be like most of the season, as Jalen kind of tries to figure out if he's a good quarterback or not. And it was a shock. I'm happy that Kirk Cousins finally looked better, even though this game was kind of back and forth, slow, and throughout. And I mean, Drake London had a last-second touchdown. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been a great performance on the night. But it's promising for Atlanta. And as for Philly, they were missing A.J. Brown a little, even though Devonta Smith had a pretty solid game. Was it 7 for 76 in a score? That was good. I was happy with that, especially with Atlanta's corners are pretty good. So all around pretty good. I think all of them, everybody that was in the game today, I upgraded them just a little bit, because I was actually politely surprised on some of the performances. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I love both teams' performances today offensively, Justin. Starting off with the Eagles and how they lost, I just sort of think that this all kind of falls down on Sirianni there. I feel like as a head coach, he has a little bit of an ego. He kind of gets ahead of himself. He doesn't play smart, strategic football. Like you mentioned, how they could have ran the ball to end the game. They were already up, and they decided to throw past, I think, the last 2 plays of that drive. And there was one where there was a pass to Barkley, and that's not something that you do when you have the lead. You're going to win, you're going to go up 2-0. It's your first home game of the year. I know last week was in Brazil, but it's just, Justin, you had that game won. Kirk Cousins didn't play all that well. He wasn't playing awful. He made plays when needed to be played, but you just can't give the ball back to him. And so I liked what I saw out of Hurts today. I thought he was really good. Barkley, obviously, the offense did what they could without, A.J. Brown tonight. Looking on the Falcons side there, Kirk Cousins made plays that need to happen, especially that drive on that touchdown drive, kind of that go ahead, in that drive that ended up Drake London scoring there. And I just feel like, they played really well, Atlanta. And I did see that late in the game, Algier kind of went out. Him and Bijan were able to kind of provide that 1-2 punch there. Looking at the kind of like the rushing stats here, they had a total of 152 rushing yards there in Atlanta. And so I was very impressed to see Kirk Cousins kind of figure out different ways to move the ball. Because, if you've known this Falcons team even before, Raheem Morris became the head coach, that Algier is a part of that rushing game. So I feel like they were able to adapt. And now we see Drake London kind of potentially stepping into that number one wide receiver category. Obviously, Kyle Pitts was a little quiet, was very quiet tonight, actually. And it's going to be one of those weeks where it's whether Kyle Pitts kind of scoring the touchdown or Drake London. But I'm very impressed, though, to see what I saw out of Atlanta.
Yeah, no, Atlanta. I'm happy with it because I have a lot of shares in the Falcons, and after Kirk Cousins in Week 1, it looked really ugly. Maybe that's just kind of due to how good Pittsburgh's defense is. But before we jump to the next game, I really want to dive into Devonta Smith. He kind of had one of his first opportunities as the lead guy, since AJ, joined the team. And he looked pretty darn good. It got 34% of the target share, got a touchdown. Clearly was, Jalen Hurts' top guy. And after Devonta, there's really nothing else besides literally Saquon catching the ball. So it was either going to Devonta or Saquon all game. And I expect AJ Brown to be out one more week, and Philly goes into New Orleans this week. But I think Devonta is an auto start, top 10 play for Week 3 against the Saints.
No,
But yeah,
I agree with you there, Justin, for sure. That could be a shootout there, as the Saints are going to try to go to 3-0.
yeah. And speaking of them, before we jump into them, we'll jump into Thursday night's game. Buffalo plays the Dolphins and routs them 31-10. And the storyline of it, Tua does leave with another concussion. Reports are he is not going to retire. He is going to come back. And I prayers out for him. That is a tough situation, having 4 concussions in the NFL in a matter of 3 seasons.
Yeah.
But looking past the injury for the Dolphins coming up, soon, it's definitely dimmer. You got to start Tyreek. You got to start Devon Achane. But after that, I get worried, even for Jalen Waddle. Playing as a receiver too for Skylar Thompson has me concerned for sure. And yeah, what are your thoughts about the Dolphins with Tua being injured?
Yeah, it does lower their stock there, especially Tyreek Hill, just because he has big play ability there, and I think that Tua was able to get him the football there. And looking at Skylar Thompson, uh, if there's only one game I have in the vault here in my memory, I'm looking at the wild card game of 2023 against the Buffalo Bills. Ironically, this is the game where Tua actually got hurt this past Thursday night. But Skylar Thompson was 220 yards and a touchdown that game in Buffalo. The final score of that game was 34-31. Looking at the stats here, Tyreek Hill had 7 catches for 69 yards, and Waddle only had 3 catches for 44 yards. So, just everybody out there in Dween Nation who has Tyreek Hill, has Jalen Waddle, A-Chain. The running back, for those who are asking, for that game for Buffalo was actually Jeff Wilson Jr., who, ironically, is still on the team. I don't know what the severity of his injury is, Justin, with Jeff Wilson. But, hey, we love A-Chain there. So just everybody out there in Dween Nation who's wondering and who's not familiar with Skylar Thompson, that's a game that I have in my head. So I'm not really sure, Justin, how well he can move the football. He didn't, like I mentioned, he did have 220 yards passing and a touchdown in Buffalo in a playoff game. So can that get better in a regular season game, especially in the road next week in Seattle? So that's something to be on the lookout there for. The head coach for Seattle is a former defensive coordinator, so can he stop a backup quarterback? I don't know, Justin. I think that could work in their favor, but I am very concerned there for the pass catchers in Miami, but not for H.A.
Good. I agree. I think they're gonna have to give Achane the ball more, even though he got 29 touches, against the Bills this week. When he came in questionable, it was really interesting. Tyreek, obviously you have to start him. That's why I guess I'm not concerned per se, because he's still gonna hopefully get hyper targeted. It's where that wide receiver too, Jalen Waddle, who is looking good with Tua this season so far before Tua's injury. That's where I have concern. But for you guys looking forward, Tua, he probably will be out, I'd assume, to week 6. They have a bye week in week 6. Come back in week 7 at Indianapolis. I think that would be best case scenario. Last time he had his major concussion against Cincinnati, he missed 4 games. So 4 weeks would leave him ready for week 7. So that would be Skylar Thompson starting against Seattle, Tennessee, and New England. 2 of those games on the road. So interesting games. As for the other side of the ball, the Buffalo Bills, they whooped that butt. James Cook had 3 scores in the first half. And honestly, if this game was competitive, he might have gone for like 5 or 6. They were sitting on that lead, and they didn't need to do too much after halftime. And Josh Allen actually has a bad fantasy performance, even though they were just in the lead so much. So if anybody's worried about that, don't be. It's just a game where they had the lead comfortably. James Cook looked, great. The receivers, again, nobody really stepped up. Even Kincaid, who was featured early and often, I believe he got 2 catches on the first drive, only ends with 4. So another dud game for Dalton Kincaid. The receiver game has me worried. I think Keon Coleman didn't even get a catch this week. So I'm still on pause with any of those those wide receivers for Buffalo. I think you still got to ride with Kincaid if you have him, unless you listen to our waiver episode and you like the guys we talk about soon. But before we jump to the next game, what were your thoughts with the Bills?
I just thought their defense looked impressive there. I just think that, the fact that when Tua was kind of already struggling before the injury. So I feel like the Buffalo defense was able to, get to Tyreek Hill, lock him up, and limit their targets to Waddle there. And I feel like they kind of controlled the game, and it forced Tua to kind of do extra, and that's what led to his injury there. I hope he's okay there. We're praying for Tua. We hope he can come back as soon as possible at 100%. But with the Buffalo defense, they played well all night, and I feel like that's actually the key takeaway of the story. You mentioned Josh Allen had a slow night, a very underwhelming night there in the fantasy world, but did everything he could. Anything he could to help them lead them that game. But Buffalo defense is something to watch, Justin, and maybe we could be talking about them later on in today. And there's another episode we talk about streaming. Maybe the defense could be something we're looking into, Justin. They have a pretty nice matchup Monday night next week, home with Jacksonville. So if you like them, kind of locking up to in Miami, I kind of like them home with Jacksonville, Justin. So
Yeah, I completely agree. And with Buffalo's defense kind of being the new thing for them, they've been looking really good there. I think that they're clear front runners for the division. I had the Jets, but they won a close one in Tennessee. I think they're going to be right behind Buffalo, but I think Buffalo's kind of in the clear driver's seat for the division. Moving to the next game, we had the New Orleans Saints go into AT&T Stadium and whoop on the Dallas Cowboys. Wild game. Derek Carr, Clint Kubiak's the new OC for the Saints. Alvin Kamara, 4 touchdowns. Rashid Shaheed, another long ball score. The Saints look like the real deal. Big shock. I think. I'm going to attribute it all to Clint Kubiak, the new play caller for the Saints. But I don't think it's a fluke. I think they looked really good. There's a lot of motion going on. Kamara still looks fresh. And they beat up on Dallas. For Dallas, I'm not too worried about the offense or anything like that. I know they got beat bad at home. CeeDee Lamb, had a 65-yard touchdown in the game. I'll let you talk about the Saints a little bit, and then we'll dive into Dallas, the running backs.
Looking at the Saints here, they're looking very impressive there. Going into the season, I was very down on the Saints. I was even saying that maybe Derek Carr could be benched. That could not be more opposite, Justin. Derek Carr was balling. The stat line isn't too, crazy for Derek Carr, but during the game, he just made plays there. 243 yards. He only had 7 passes thrown with 11 to completion, so 11 for 16 there, 2 touchdowns. But the story of the day was Alvin Kamara there. I mean, I remember when he broke out in 2017. It's crazy that his age now and his how long he's been in the NFL. It's crazy that he is still a top running back in the fantasy world, Justin. All these years later, here's Alvin Kamara still, even with the Sean Payton not even being the head coach anymore, We know how great of an offensive play caller he was. The Saints defense, offense looked good. The defense looked even better. But one thing I want to mention is this guy Shaheed, their wide receiver Rashid Shaheed, out of Weber State. I don't know, the only other player, the only other athlete that went to Weber State is Damian Lillard, right? But Rashid Shaheed, this guy is becoming a breakout star. He had flashes last year. With what the Saints were, they were on and off last year. They won one game, lost one game, but he had a pretty decent season. He made his name well known in that Saints offense. But now this year, Justin, he is off to a great start. In 2 games already this year, 7 catches, 169 yards with 2 touchdowns there. So, hey, he is top 8 in the receiving yards leader here in the NFL within the first 2 weeks, tied for 2 receiving touchdowns. So it's off to a great start. If he is available, obviously he's probably the number 1 waiver wire pickup. I like his matchup next week against Philadelphia at home. That is a potential shootout. So Saints are looking pretty good. Let's just see if they can keep it, consistent.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think next week will be a good test, and if they beat up on Philly, at home, I think they're almost a lock for the division. Them and Tampa Bay, who had a really good victory in Detroit. Derek Carr right now, quarterback 2 on the season behind Baker Mayfield. Not what the public would have thought with the quarterbacks would look like after 2 weeks, but Derek Carr's looked great. Is a great pickup in fantasy. Hopefully, if you guys check out the waiver show, you might hear a couple things about Derek Carr. As for Chris Olave, again another blowout game, and he has a okay game, 4 for 81. But he's just fine. I'm not too worried about him. Kind of a low end wide receiver 2 now, even though I think he was, preseason kind of deemed a high end wide receiver 2. So he's on the lower tier, but it's really good that the Saints are looking good. I think Shaheed, as you mentioned, is a guy that needs to be added. I think he's added in 63% of leagues already. But if he's out there in your leagues, I think he's going to be a great deep threat every week, kind of challenging defenses. So I think that's good there. As for Dallas, the running backs, man, it's scary. I don't want to trust any of them. I mean, it was all a mixed bag. Zeke got some touches. He got 6 carries, 2 catches. Didn't do too much with that. Rico Dowdle 7 carries, 4 catches. And even Deuce Vaughn got a couple runs. 4 runs. And Hunter Lepke, he got a catch, right? Oh no, that was the first week he had some touches. But it's a clear committee, which I didn't think was going to be kind of the case. And it has me downgrading them all. I picked up Dowdle last week, kind of being ready for maybe a breakout of sorts, or just to show that he's kind of the lead back. But it's pretty even across the board. What are your thoughts of the running backs?
Yeah, it's very confusing on how they want to kind of utilize these backs. Obviously last week with Zeke scoring a touchdown on the road, I kind of had this feeling that was going to be a little bit of a Zeke game, but Zeke was hardly a factor there. Just not, I think he had 6 carries for 16 yards. That's pretty much it. And obviously they signed Dalvin Cook. I don't know if they're going to implement him in the offense anytime soon. I don't think he was active for yesterday's game. Deuce Vaughn, I had someone tell me that Deuce Vaughn looked pretty good yesterday. And so maybe they could probably potentially use him. You still have Rico Dowdle, who they kind of just been implementing last year behind Pollard. Now this year, I don't really know if they know their role with Dowdle there. I just feel like they should kind of give the keys to Deuce Vaughn and see what he could do. I think drafted him last year out of Kansas State, he was a pretty good running back there. I think he was one of the best running backs in the Big 12 just a handful of years ago. So I feel like he could be the guy to provide, Dallas this, offensive, they need an offensive spark. When you look at their victory last week in Cleveland, that was all defense, to be honest. Dak just did anything he could just to add to it. But in this week it was very underwhelming. Only 19 points there in Jerry World. They need to have something new there. Obviously, they don't have Ferguson, their tight end, and they need a spark there. So I'd say just give the keys to Deuce Vaughn. Give him 20 carries, 20 to 25. Give all those other running backs nothing. Just if you want to have Zeke inactive for a game, that might be the route to go. Or Dowdle, maybe just have Deuce and Zeke there, since Zeke is a veteran there. I feel like Dallas needs something as immediately there, because they do have Baltimore coming into town. And Baltimore on an 0-2 run, it's very scary for Lamar Jackson to be coming in your building 0-2. And so they need something immediately, Justin. And so if you want to ask me what I think Dallas should do, let's just give Deuce Vaughn 20 carries there, 20 to 25. Keep a running back inactive, and let's see what we can do to move the chains.
Interesting. Okay. All right. Well, we'll move to the next game. Tampa Bay upsets Detroit in Detroit. I think the biggest takeaway: Baker Mayfield and Chris Godwin have this, new connection that it might be the connection that we saw with Evans last year. I mean, Godwin was getting everything out of the slot. 7 catches, 117 and a score. Currently the wide receiver 2 through 2 weeks. So Chris Godwin kind of, a revitalization after, a couple years of injuries and not playing super, great. Even Baker Mayfield, though, he throws a touchdown on the air, runs one on the ground. Not like a crazy fantasy game. Still a quarterback 1 through 2 weeks. But he actually leads the team in rushing. It's clear the Lions are one of the best, if not the best, rushing defenses in the league. I mean, Rachaad White, 10 carries, 18 yards, meh. And Bucky Irving, 7 for 22, not great either, but we see the mix though. So Rachaad White, managers, I have some concern, some red flags that Bucky Irving's kind of carving his role in the offense, and it's going to be at a detriment of Rachaad White. As for Evans, doesn't have a great game. No worries there. And on the Detroit side, Jared Goff has an ugly-ish game. 2 picks. He throws for over 300 because he relied heavily on Amon-Ra St. Brown. 11 catches, 119, 19 targets in this game. He has a great game. He does leave injured. We're hoping for good news. I don't think it's too serious. So he should be all right, but he does leave the game injured. Jameson Williams looked really good again. He had another run, and then he had, 5 for 79. Not the best game, but still pretty good. And then Montgomery. Montgomery doesn't do too much on the ground, but does get in the end zone. And then the big news of it is he gets 4 catches. We thought that was exclusively Gibbs' role, but Monty gets some catches to have a really good fantasy day. And I think how Detroit runs their offense, it's literally been Jahmyr Gibbs drive, David Montgomery drive, Jahmyr Gibbs drive, David Montgomery. Oh my God, I can't speak. But you get what I'm saying. So I think it's like straight up a 50-50 split. It just depends on the drive, depending, what the score is and kind of what their plan is per that drive. So I like both running backs still, but Montgomery's going up the ranks for me. He's looking great too. And then last bit of things, Sam Laporta, another down game, only 2 for 13. I think with them losing, I think they're going to go back in the toolbox and see that Laporta wasn't being featured as much, and they're going to get him the ball, especially if Amon-Ra misses any time. But what were your thoughts on the game?
Yeah, Justin. First, I cannot go without the segment without mentioning that Aiden Hutchinson had 4.5 sacks. That's
Wild.
pretty crazy there. I mean, literally, I remember when he was, debated as the number 1, pick a couple years ago. But that's crazy. The most sacks in the game, if you're asking there in Dween Nation, is 7 sacks there. So if he had 4.5, I was watching Red Zone wondering, hey, when is he going to break that record? Because there was I remember seeing it was 2.5. He's at 3.5. And I'm like, I thought that was pretty impressive. So Aiden Hutchinson there, early candidate for Defensive Player of the Year. One thing that stood out to me though, Justin, is how Jared Goff didn't throw a touchdown pass there. I thought when he was home, against Tampa Bay, I was thinking he had at least throw a touchdown or 2 there. And part of it, I feel like that's Laporta's kind of area in the red zone. Amon-Ra St. Brown had most of the yards department. So, last year, how they kind of finished that off was to go to Laporta there in the red zone. And Justin, you've kind of called it so far this year that he was going to be struggling there. And within 2 weeks, I don't think he has 100 yards on the season. I don't even think he has 80. So I know he had a weird week last week against the Rams. He had a weird week yesterday. And so I do like his matchup, though, next week in Arizona. And so, we're not sure if Amon-Ra will play. So I definitely that, that passing workload kind of goes towards Sam Laporta there. But you just got to give credits to the Buccaneers defense there. They played phenomenal there, I think. They limited them to only 130 yards with those 2 elusive backs there that they have in Detroit. Jared Goff didn't throw a touchdown, and they picked them off twice. And so they did what they could. They didn't allow, Jameson Williams did have 79 yards receiving, but he didn't have like a deep, kind of deep threat touchdown. He didn't have a deep there catch for 50 yards. I think he could have scored there. So Tampa Bay was able to do what they could with those, playmakers there in Detroit, and their defense there. Now back-to-back weeks there, kind of helping that offense out. I mean, last week Baker was able to take advantage. This week Baker kind of just hung in there, barely thrown for 185 yards there. So Tampa Bay defense is one to look out. Now, Justin, it's crazy that whenever the Buccaneers and the Saints get together in a couple weeks, that's probably going to be the game of the week because these two defenses are performing as well as their offenses.
No, yeah, Tampa Bay's been another shock of the league. Both teams in the NFC, in the NFC South. But Baker Mayfield totally cooked that. Did you see he cooked that linebacker?
Mm-hmm.
Little man's feisty. I like Baker Mayfield now. I'm on that train.
Yeah.
With what he's doing in Tampa Bay. Moving to the next game, the Packers win a close one at home against the Colts in a game that shocked me. I was pretty convinced we'd see some fireworks from the Colts after a very intense game against the Texans last week. But they go into Lambeau and the Green Bay Packers the defense holds up very well, gets 3 picks on AR. AR did look bad. He made some bad passes. It just wasn't pretty. And then Green Bay just relied on the run game. I mean, Jacobs had 32 carries. This team ended up having 53 carries on the ground by all rushers, some wide receivers, some Malik Willis. But they know how to milk the clock, and they do it very effectively. They get the victory. None of the receivers really do anything too special. I know Wicks got in the end zone. Reed doesn't do much this game. He has more yards on the ground than in the air. And then Malik Willis does enough to get the victory. As for the Colts side, Jonathan Taylor, he gets the carries. He actually doesn't get too many. He only had 12 carries. He gets 100 yards. The big question mark when I was watching it, fourth quarter goes, they're trying to come back in this game. I think they were down 16-3. No Jonathan Taylor to be seen. He actually doesn't have a single touch in the fourth quarter. And I'm curious as to, I know they were down, but you would rely on, who's Trey Sermon to kind of carry that third down work. I guess that's what they're relying on, which has me a little worried with Jonathan Taylor not being utilized in close games like that or in games where they need to come back. I think he's a capable pass catcher, but the Colts maybe don't think that, and he doesn't have that ultimate boom game. He has a good game. He got 100 yards, got a couple catches, but I was expecting even more in a plus matchup where Green Bay just gave Saquon Barkley the running back one on the week in week 1, but Taylor doesn't do so. The Colts falter. Alec Pierce has another good week though with a score. So maybe he is more of a real thing than I thought previously. And Pittman struggles again, which has me a little worried with his value.
Yeah, Justin. Another thing that I'm noticing here there with the Colts that you mentioned, Alec Pierce, he's done good, but a guy by the name of Michael Pittman his name has not been called this season. Looking at his stats so far, he only has 7 catches for 52 yards on the season, and that's very concerning there. This is a guy, that was drafted in the 3rd or 4th round in fantasy drafts. And he was, their number 1 wide receiver there last year when it was just Gardner Minshew being the quarterback with no AR. So that's something to notice there with the Colts. And I'm honestly surprised that they're 0-2. The Packers only scored 16 points. I know the Colts could have scored 17. I know they could have scored 21 or 24 with that offense. So it just leads me to questioning there. Is that how healthy is AR? He looked well last week against Houston, and he throws, he goes in this week, going against a backup quarterback, and he throws 3 interceptions. That completely throws me off here. Malik Willis only has to throw for 122 yards. You mentioned Jacobs had a workload of a game there with 32 carries, and it's just concerning because there's maybe that shoulder injury is lingering just a little bit with AR. So let's see what he does against a tough Chicago Bears defense, who lost last night as well. Week 3, Justin, is absolutely looking juicy. I mean, I am so excited for week 3, Justin. I'm so excited to talk about it later this week. I know I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but this makes football amazing because now you have Anthony Richardson home with those Bears. That's going to be a game to watch. So My biggest question out of the Colts, you have concerns with Jonathan Taylor. I have concerns with the passing game. Is AR healthy? And are we getting the ball to our right playmakers? Obviously, Taylor isn't there on that last drive, but why are we looking to, Michael Pittman more? He only had what? It was only 7 targets with 3 catches there. I need Pittman to have at least 10 to 15 targets.
Yeah, especially what we saw last year. Pittman was all over the
Mhm.
field. I know it was Gardner Minshew throwing him the rock, but AR is supposed to be kind of that guy, the franchise guy. It could be the shoulder. I think it might be just he only played a handful of games last year. Maybe he's just taking him longer to get up to speed. But we saw some flashes in week 1 against the Texans. So he definitely regresses in his outputs against the Packers, and the Packers get a win at home, a shocking one. Moving to the next game, another road victory. This one is the New York Jets against the Titans. And Will Levis does it again, makes a major mistake. Um, it looked funny. I was laughing. And then it cuts to Brian Callahan, and he says something not safe for work. What the F are you doing? It was hilarious. I was like, Will Levis does it again. We'll see. Obviously, they're going to have to rely on him as the starter. But the bright spot of Tennessee, they get it to Calvin Ridley. He gets 2 touchdowns, 1 rushing and 1 receiving. A great catch receiving on Sauce Gardner. And I think Calvin Ridley, I mean, I have high hopes for him this year. Week 1 wasn't too pretty, but week 2 he looks great. And he gets 2 scores. The bad news, Tyjae Spears does leave the game injured. And actually, while I'm looking up what the possibilities on his injury, what are your thoughts though with how Tennessee performed?
Yeah, I mean, they're still a little bit of an underwhelming team. I like how they kind of got, Calvin Ridley there involved. I'm a little concerned for DeAndre Hopkins there. Very quiet. Obviously, he's getting up there in age. And so, only 17 yards on the season there for DeAndre Hopkins. It's mind blowing. He is 32 years old, but I expect him to have somewhat of a better start to a season. So, um, you know, I don't know if he's hurt there. I think he is looking a little questionable with some type of injury. I'm not sure if it's lingering here, but whatever with the Titans there. Pollard's going to be that workhorse there, and so they play the Packers next week at home. It's going to be probably Malik Willis again at quarterback. So with the Titans, hey, I feel like Will Levis could have a pretty decent game. Maybe Ridley could have another good game, repeat of what he did yesterday. And Titans aren't going to be that team that's winning, but fantasy wise, they could help you.
Yeah, and so I was looking at Tyjae. It says he has an ankle injury that's day to day, so he probably will be fine. But if he does miss, the game this week, Tony Pollard I think is a lock in top 12 RB on the week, because he's pretty good so far this season. As for the Jet side of the ball, Brees Hall has a fine game. He scores a touchdown through the air. That was a sick touchdown grab that he got. But the more shocking story is Braylon Allen, rookie running back from Wisconsin, 20-year-old back, gets 2 scores, 1 through the air, 1 on the ground. He looked phenomenal. I mean, I think he showed out. I might be getting too hot with it, but I think he could be one of the top handcuffs in the league. I think he's a great handcuff pick. He's not owned in many leagues. Braylon Allen looked good, and he was being utilized. I don't know if Brees left the game injured or anything for some portion of the game, but Braylon Allen got his touches. 7 carries. He got, how many catches did he get? 2 catches, fine. But it helps the Jets get a major victory, and he looks like a great RB. As for Garrett Wilson, another slow game, only 4 for 57. I think he'll be okay. I think he'll still be. I think he's that same kind of conversation that I was saying with Olave, where Garrett Wilson was going as a low end wide receiver 1. I kind of view him as a low end wide receiver 2 rest of the season. I think he will improve a bit, but I don't think he'll be too reliable every week, especially with the Jets. I feel like they're going to be back and forth with being a good offense. But those are kind of all my thoughts with the Jets. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the Jets have potential to be good there. I think each week now Rodgers is getting a little bit more acclimated into that offense. So I like what I saw there. They're also getting the ball to different playmakers there. You mentioned Braylon Allen. And, I'm not saying this is going to be a running back by committee thing because Brees Hall is obviously so talented. But watch out for kind of a Detroit situation where obviously you have Montgomery, he's the workhorse, but then you have a speedy guy out of the backfield like Gibbs, and this could be in their case Braylon Allen, and he's got a couple rushing touchdowns yesterday, and he looks great. The rookie, and I really like what he brings to this offense now. And this is a guy that's gonna need to get involved in this offense. This is a guy that Aaron Rodgers is going to possibly be looking for out of the backfield. And so I like Braylon Allen there, out of Wisconsin. And so, looking at the receivers there, what they have, Garrett Wilson has been struggling a little bit. We like Malachi Corley. We kind of thought that he'd be utilized just a little bit more. We're not really sure, if they're even looking Mike Williams' way. Only had a target there, a catch for 19 yards. We're not sure if he's just kind of there behind an injury. And Alan Lazard there, he after having a great game last week in San Francisco, this week doesn't really quite look that too often, only with 4 targets. So this is a guy in Braylon Allen that is a sneaky waiver wire pickup. And I love the talent. He passes the eye test. Kind of reminds me a little bit of like a Zach Charbonnet as well, like the situation with Brees Hall being that Kenneth Walker alpha guy. But if, hey, Brees Hall were to miss a game, Braylon Allen is a great plug-and-play guy, a guy that everybody has to pick up just for, just in case. But even if Brees Hall stays healthy all year, Braylon Allen is a guy that you can still possibly start somewhat mid-season because he's going to be getting looked at a lot.
Yeah, I think that's great. I'm high on Braylon Allen rest of the season. Moving to the next game, we have the Niners on the road in Minnesota. They lose to the Vikings. The Vikings, man, another team that wasn't kind of viewed as a team that has what it takes, and they show up. Sam Darnold's revenge tour, as some are touting it. He looked great. 97-yard touchdown to Jay Jettas was awesome. I was hyped. I have him in our big league. Good week for Jefferson. For those worried, he's going to be okay. He had a quad contusion, I believe, but day to day, they said he avoided any kind of serious injury and should be ready for next week. As for the running backs, even Aaron Jones leaves the game a little nicked up. He has a fumble. Ty Chandler gets most of the carries in the game, and Ty Chandler, who I think I mentioned in the offseason, but one of the top handcuffs as well. I think he like, if you had to look at it where the starter gets injured, like how McCaffrey got injured and now Jordan Mason's the guy, I think he is one of the top of those handcuffs where if he gets the starting role, he'll be a top 10, top 15 back. So he should be on your roster if he's available. And then the last thing with Minnesota, Jalen Naylor gets another score. I don't know how much I'm buying into it still, because he's got 2 touchdowns in 2 weeks, but not a crazy target share. But definitely somebody to keep your eye on. And then we flip to San Francisco. They lose Deebo Samuel. He's expected to miss now a couple of weeks with an injury. That boosts up Brandon Ayuk big time. Ayuk has had a slow start through 2 weeks. Also had no training camp to kind of prepare. So that was kind of assumed to happen. But now he's going to be thrusted into the spotlight with Deebo Samuel being injured, McCaffrey being out. Same for George Kittle, who had a good game. I believe he scored a touchdown, correct? Yeah, 7 for 76 in the score, probably one of the top tight ends on the week. I think that's more. We're going to see more of that, now that Deebo's injured. So Purdy, I think, is still set up to be very good. And then Jordan Mason, 20 carries again, gets 100 on the ground and a score. I think he solidifying himself as a top 7 back for until McCaffrey comes back.
Yeah, this was such a fun game to watch. I'm not gonna lie, Justin. And I love the way Jefferson is just so sensational there, scoring a 97-yard touchdown. I mean, he is one. No matter who's throwing him the football, he is still going to be a great wide receiver there. And so looking at Darnold there, he has solidified himself as a starter. Even though that JJ McCarthy is out for the year, Darnold is on a revenge tour. And once again, week 3 is a juicy one because now a 3-0, or excuse me, a 2-0 team is facing another 2-0 team where they welcome in my Houston Texans. And that is a juicy matchup there for Darnold. And so you mentioned Jalen Naylor. Justin, I do like Jalen Naylor just because he is replacing Jordan Addison, who's injured, as well as a target share of what Osborne did last year. Osborne is now a New England Patriot. And so Jalen Naylor is kind of getting that all those target shares, kind of like how the Bills had all this target share after losing, Diggs and Gabe Davis. I know that's not really comparable, but in some ways it is in this Vikings offense. They kind of need that number one wide receiver two to shine alongside Justin Jefferson, who's so phenomenal. To take your word there. And so you mentioned Ty Chandler there. Could be that next backup there. And so, we'll see what this, how injured Aaron Jones is. This is the time of year where Aaron Jones always catches these knick-knack injuries. And he also had a fumble, I believe, yesterday. So
At the one, I believe. I think
at
the
the
Vikings were actually about to put it away,
yeah.
and then Aaron Jones fumbled.
So that's something to look at. And so he got outplaced by Ty Chandler's there. So as well as yards and in carries. So um, definitely something to look at there. And it's going to be a pretty interesting waiver wire week for sure.
No, I completely agree. And this next game was, to me, one of the shocking fun games. As you mentioned, this last one was. I think this game surprised a lot. It was the Seahawks winning in overtime against the New England Patriots on the road in Gillette Stadium. We saw Geno Smith. I think this offense maybe kind of forming into what we would really love as fantasy players. I mean, JSN gets 12 catches, 117. DK Metcalf 10 catches, 129 and a score. They were getting the rock. Geno Smith was throwing it, 44 pass attempts, 327 yards, only that one touchdown. But Charbonnet gets in the end zone, has a pretty solid day with Ken Walker being out and injured. So the Seahawks, they get a close one, and I like what they're. I feel like they're going to slowly keep building and be interesting, and JSN kind of hopefully builds into that wide receiver 2 for Seattle, and someone you can count on in fantasy. And then as for the Patriots side, I think the biggest storyline, again, Ramondre Stevenson getting 21 carries, gets a touchdown, looks very good. I think as long as New England are in these tight games, I really like Ramondre Stevenson all season. I wasn't a firm believer in him as a top 10 back, but he's proven me otherwise. Him and Jordan Mason are the only two running backs with 20 plus carries in both weeks. So he's their main guy. And then on the receiving end, I know Jalen Polk scored a touchdown, which is interesting. But the storyline that we need to be looking at, Hunter Henry, 8 catches, 109. He was getting targeted heavily, 12 targets. Is a clear a great pickup if you need a tight end. Because it's been kind of underwhelming most of the tight ends this season. But Hunter Henry has a great game. And I think he's worth a pickup. What are your thoughts with this game, though?
Yeah, no, Justin, this was a matchup between the two, young head coaches, the two rookie head coaches that have a lot of promise in this league. They were coordinators, once upon a time, and they have taken over their franchise respectively, and they have provided a new sense, a new kind of era, a new culture. I kind of liking what I got out of it. And I'm glad we got this matchup early in week 2. It would have been interesting to see if the Patriots had started Drake May though. Brissett played good enough from my liking. I would say though, I'm very impressed with what Geno Smith was able to do in New England. I thought he kind of struggled there. I thought he, had some, bad plays, but no, 327 yards, no turnovers, and a touchdown there. He was 33 for 44. So pretty good there for Geno Smith and, New England, which, they were kind of honoring that 2014 team that beat the Seahawks in the Super Bowl. So they were probably all, pumped up. And one thing to look at, though, you mentioned, how, Stevenson is good and all, and he had a touchdown, but Antonio Gibson had 11 carries for 96 yards. So, if you give some of those yards to Ramondre, he's over 100. So if you give, Gibson less carries, maybe Ramondre has a better day fantasy-wise, so that's something to look at. I did see that Brissett kind of went out late in that game. I think he stayed in, but I did see a play where he got hurt. I don't know if that injury is lingering on. I did see him kind of return, so that's something to be on the lookout. But hey, this was a very interesting matchup between these two head coaches that have bright futures that are providing, very interesting football for teams. Justin, we weren't so high about Patriots. We were like, maybe they could win they could, have be a surprise. Seahawks the same as well, but even though the Patriots are 1-1, they have a nice matchup going into Thursday night against the Jets.
No, I completely agree. I think that's good analysis on it. Seattle 2-0, looking good. The division now with the Rams being really injury riddled, and San Francisco lost this week. Arizona did look good, which we'll talk about soon. But Seahawks doing better than I thought so far, even though they've had only Denver and New England to play through 2 weeks. Dween Nation, we just covered 8 games. We're gonna cut it and make a part 2 for you guys. You can kind of dive into these 8, dive into the next 8, and then also we'll have a waivers episode. So we'll be right back. But I always want to end the episode with Genoa sending us out.
Yo, Dween Nation, thanks for watching part 1. Go ahead and watch part 2 about all the rest of week 2 recap. Getting you guys ready for week 3. But as always, guys, we love y'all and
Peace.